Whew, oh boy. We got a lot to talk about tonight here on WrestleMan with the podcast here. Summer is heating up. It is hot as hell outside, but the wrestling business is heating up just as much on the road to SummerSlam here. Obviously, we got Money in the Bank. That was last Saturday, and I got a brand new special guest because I cannot stop having brand new guests. I just love bringing new people on here. And as a hint, he was a professor of mine, and he actually got me into doing this podcasting from a podcasting class. So that's going to be very special and cool for me to do that. So, yeah, like I said, go over Money in the Bank. We'll go over John Cena retiring in 2025. We'll go over CM Punk screwing over Drew McIntyre for the fourth time in a few months. And then we're also going to go over Monday Night Raw from last night, including Mommy returning to WWE, Rhea Ripley coming back, and the Wyatt Six continuing to haunt Chad Gable for some reason, that poor man. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get started.
Welcome to WrestleMan with the podcast. I'm Dylan Shields. We talk Raw, SmackDown, wrestling news, and some fun top lists. With that being said, ring the bell.
Alrighty here. So without further introduction here, this, like I mentioned, he is a podcasting professor. He was a professor of mine at the podcasting class. Got me started with this WrestleMan with a podcast. Official title, he is the department chair / associate professor in the communication and theater department at Millersville University. Yes, I read it off my phone just to remember. His name is Dr. Lowry A. Woodall. How are you doing? It has been a while since I've seen you. How's it feel to be on this podcast?
I'm doing well. I'm really happy to be here. I enjoyed your podcast when you were in my class. Obviously, you and I shared a love of pro wrestling. While I enjoyed listening to all my students' podcasts, it was a bit of a special treat to get to listen to a pro wrestling one. Every week when I was grading, that was a little extra treat for me, and loved wrestling all my life, and so great to be on the show, and I'm happy to talk about Money in the Bank and about this latest episode of Raw and catch up on some things.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were just talking about you being a fan. Doesn't have to be too long, but in detail so the viewers know your history of wrestling. You've talked to me about this before in the events you've gone to. You went to WrestleMania Night 2 this year. You've been a fan longer than I've been alive. So give us a little more detail about like your fandom wrestling, maybe like how you got started and maybe any other pay-per-views that you've gone to.
Yeah. So I am ancient, as Dylan noted. I'm 43, and I started watching wrestling back in 1990 for the first time, November of 1990 to be specific. I actually talk about how I got introduced to wrestling for the first time in the introduction to a book I published back in 2022 that talked about representation in WWE, race, gender, sexuality, etc. in WWE. My uncle on my mom's side introduced me to it. He had pirated a couple of pay-per-views off of his cable box illegally, and he had two tapes that I watched. I watched the 1990 Survivor Series, which is really only notable for the fact that it was the debut of The Undertaker. And I watched the NWA's 1989 Wrestle War, which was the last of the series of 3 matches in 1989 that Ric Flair and Ricky the Dragon Steamboat had. And at the end of that match is also the setup for the beginning of the feud that Flair would have with Terry Funk in that same year, which was also quite good. But so 2 incredibly different pay-per-views. Wrestle War 89 from a wrestling standpoint, an extraordinarily great in-ring product. The Survivor Series 1990, really a trash product in terms of in-ring quality. You can't find a good match on the show, I dare you. But I mean, I was a little kid, and I fell in love with the pageantry and the spectacle and the characters, and I mean, it was just kind of like a light bulb going off for me. Like I immediately got what it was. I immediately understood why people would want to watch this, and I was completely hooked ever since. I'd never missed an episode for WWE or the NWA, which was about to become WCW officially after that, and yeah, so I've been watching since November of 1990 until, where are we in right now? July of 2024. I mean, to be fair, for much of my childhood, that wasn't nearly as big of a weight to carry week by week as it is now. You would have maybe 2 shows a week for most of my childhood, and then slowly, you start to build up. We get Raw in 1992 or 3, and then slowly you get Monday Night Nitro, and you get a couple of extra shows on the weekends, and so on and so forth, and you get SmackDown, and I mean, it builds up and builds up, and now, I mean, I think it would be even tougher to be a wrestling fan coming into it now, because it's almost like you have so much choice. There's so many things out there. I mean, you can not just watch WWE, but AEW, ROH. You can watch New Japan Pro Wrestling if you want to through your cable subscriber, assuming people have cable. And I mean, there's just so much stuff, and then to sit there and dig through the archives and the WWE network, that kind of thing on Peacock. There's just so much stuff there. So anyway, I mean, I've been a fan for a very long time. I've gone to some events. I've gone to WrestleMania 14. I was in the crowd at that for Boston. As you said, I was again at WrestleMania this year. The second WrestleMania I went to was WrestleMania 40. The second night of that, and I've been to a handful of smaller events, some house shows that WWE put on. I've been to a handful of Raws over the years, starting in about 1996 and going to today. We were just talking, I went to the Raw that was in Hershey like 3 weeks ago with a buddy of mine. And then I went to a couple of WCW shows as well. I have the dubious distinction of having seen WCW Thunder live. I don't recommend doing it.
It's crazy.
And then I've gone to my fair share of indie wrestling shows over the years too. Whatever indie federations happen to be within driving distance of me, I would go and see some folks there. And you meet some really cool wrestlers either on the way up or the way down by going to those shows, and see some really fantastic wrestling that way too. So. I've been fortunate to see a lot of pro wrestling in my life, and now I mean, I've kind of made it part of what I do professionally. I study pro wrestling. I publish books and articles about professional wrestling and what its impact is on our culture. I'm the outgoing president of the Professional Wrestling Studies Association, which is a group of international scholars who study pro wrestling. We have a virtual conference, WrestlePosium, every single year that is free to come to watch, to participate in if you'd like to. I would encourage everyone to go take a look at our website for the PWSA when you get a chance. If you'd like to contribute in any way, we'd love to have you. Always looking to build that network of scholarship. And the last thing I'll say is that I am now currently working to build towards doing a study abroad trip in the summer of 2025, where I'll take, hopefully, at least, fingers crossed, I'll take a group of about 10 students over to Tokyo, Japan with me, and we will watch professional wrestling live in the Tokyo Dome.
Wow.
For about 7 or 8 days there. There will be other things as well, but I mean, the thrust of the trip is we're going to see 4 or 5 pro wrestling shows while we're there, and hopefully watch a sumo match or 2 as well.
Well, that's very cool. And hearing about your history and your passion of the business has been crazy. Your wrestling fandom was right when The Undertaker to debut, which is like perfect timing there. And I know you mentioned that, yes, it is like really tough to get into wrestling because there's so much, but I believe that's also the beauty of being a wrestling fan today. There's something for everybody. You like big hoss fights, you like big men slapping man meat, like Big E says, you get that. You like more acrobatic type matches, you have that. You like strong style, you'll get that. You like more of the storytelling aspect and big names, you have that. That's the beauty of it. So yeah, it is endless content, and it's kind of like a pick and choose type deal. That's why I prioritize WWE in terms of my podcast, but mention AEW and try to watch other promotions like TNA and New Japan. And then obviously my internship at 3LW that you guys should check out. But yeah, it's great to be doing a podcast, especially in this time of wrestling that everyone's saying is a new boom period, or at least the product is improving across promotions. More people can get work now because there's all types of companies. It's very cool to see. But let's get into what we are going to mainly talk about here. This is the first time, Woodall, you get to see my lovely PowerPoint that most of the time I pop up. It is 16th regular episode of WrestleMan the podcast. I've done a bunch of special ones with predictions, but 16th rendition here. We're going to do Money in the Bank review first here. So guess we should start with the opening match, the men's ladder match. Not too long of a men's match. It was one of the shorter ones that I've remembered, but action-packed, a bunch of crazy spots. I think Andrade specifically was a big MVP in this match. But if you guys watch my predictions, I called it. Me and my friend Matt, who's the king of predictions at this point, called it. Drew McIntyre won the men's match. So what do you think about this opening match? How did you think, despite like the kind of limited time they had, it was still pretty action-packed?
Yeah, I mean, I thought there were some nice spots in this match, like you said. I thought Andrade had some good airtime in this match. I actually really liked the ending spot where McIntyre just threw the top of the ladder in order to get the briefcase. But in terms of match quality, I'd say this was pretty close to the bottom of the show for me. I mean, I can't imagine myself ever wanting to go back and rewatch this match again. It's one of those things where like I need to see it in real time as it happened. But was it a great match? No, I didn't think it was a particularly great match. The women's match that we'll talk about later, I thought vastly outshined this. I mean, it was night and day. I did have this wrong. I'll break it to you right now. While I usually am pretty good at this, apparently the plans that I thought we would have for SummerSlam are not the plans that they had for SummerSlam. And so, I had this way off. I actually thought that Jey Uso was probably going to come away with this. I had suspected that CM Punk would cost McIntyre the Money in the Bank
earlier.
That he would run in during the match and cost him the match. Obviously, they went a different direction with it, which is fine. What I will say is I still think that Jey Uso probably would have been the better choice to win it. I think he gets more out of it. What they've basically done here is they've used the Money in the Bank as just a prop to move this feud with CM Punk further. And while I agree it adds a certain additional layer of antagonism to it, I mean, I feel like this feud was pretty hot to begin with anyway. I don't know that we needed them to go as far as they did in Money in the Bank just to prop this feud up further to make us care about it more. I think people were already pretty heavily on board with it. So I don't know. To me, it felt a little bit like a wasted opportunity, but I respect that's the decision they wanted to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we get to Rollins Priest, I'll give my 2 cents on like the controversy, because I know a lot of people have said what you've said. But yeah, I kind of agree. It was kind of like, okay, like pretty decent, but it's not not gonna be something. It's like, oh, go back and watch it. And yeah, and it really to me came down to either Jay or Drew. I didn't really think anyone else had much of a chance. What kind of surprised me in this match, kind of in a sort of good way, I expected people like the Wyatt Six to show up and cost Gable, and maybe even Logan Paul come out and cost LA Knight. We didn't get any of that. We just got a clean like ladder match without any interferences, which I kind of liked. I would have liked to see the Wyatt Six, at least like the lights as Gable's climbing the ladder, maybe start to turn off and he's like running away or something, or it freaks him out. I will say when he was hanging off the ladder with the briefcase and then he falls down, that was pretty brutal spot. I remember Styles did something similar. Those are always brutal spots there. But yeah, when we get to the women's match, I do agree that the quality there was a lot better than the men's there. Before we get to the whole McIntyre cashing in, the second match was Sami Zayn versus Braun Breaker for the IC title. To me, it was a good match. Started a little bit slow, feeling out, but then Breaker looked like $1 billion as always. His speed and athleticism is amazing, and it's hard to find someone who's as good as Sami in terms of portraying the underdog that fights back, but it doesn't look cliche or boring. He looks like a badass when he does it here, and I predicted Sami to win. But I was very hesitant to do it because I could have easily seen them immediately just pushing Breaker to the moon and giving him the belt. But it was hard for me to see Sami losing heading into SummerSlam as champion. I think they wanted to give him a decent reign after he ended Gunther's long reign. I mean, I know people are saying, oh, like it ruined Breaker. Oh, why did he lose? I mean, I don't think it hurt him. It honestly just made him more pissed off. And what we saw on Raw, it just adds to his character just being more pissed and just more dominant. I don't think it hurts him. Even though I picked Sami, it was a little of a surprised outcome. It was in Canada, not his hometown, but it was still in Toronto. But yeah, I think it was a good match. Maybe the most forgettable of the night. I mean, just because a bunch of other stuff felt bigger, but I still think it was a pretty good match.
Yeah, no, I would agree that I thought it was a perfectly, passable match. I didn't have a problem with Sami winning this match. I didn't like the fact that he won it clean.
Yeah.
The way I had, I guess, envisioned this going in my head was that Sami would win either by disqualification or by countout or something like that. Something that maybe just kind of protected Braun a little bit more, especially because, I mean, you can so clearly see that, like, I mean, Braun Breaker is, for them right now, doing basically what what Lesnar was doing when he first started with the company back in the early 2000s.
That's a perfect comparison, yeah.
I mean, he's going to be that guy for them, and well deserved, by the way. I mean, just outstanding wrestler. Great pedigree that he comes from. With the Steiner brothers, and really, I mean, did a fantastic job in NXT when he was there. But I didn't love him getting pinned cleanly this early. I just thought if Sami could have pissed him off so much that he just kind of like saw red for a minute and used a chair or something, or like shoved the referee out of the way without thinking about it, something sort of simple, but that would give them an excuse to be like, oh, sorry, he's disqualified. I mean, you can't do that, obviously. And then you could have set up SummerSlam as, well, it'll be a no DQ match. It'll be a street fight. It'll be whatever when we inevitably do the rematch. And, I think that we won't just see it be the two of them in the rematch. I think they'll add at least one other person to make it like a 3-way dance or a 4-way dance.
I could easily go it off your point there. I was about to say, I think Ludwig and Sheamus were kind of involved in that picture. And I know on Raw they weren't exactly involved with Sammy and Braun, but I'd like to see a fatal 4-way between them, because obviously Sheamus going for that record-breaking, or not record-breaking, but hit Grand Slam champion. He's never held the IC belt. And I've liked Ludwig's work as a heel. And Gunther's, we know he's got a world title match at SummerSlam, and I'm not saying they need to do it, but a world where he's somehow the Intercontinental Champion, pulls off an upset, and Gunther wins the world title, that would be pretty cool to me. So at least I would have him and Sheamus in the match to make it more interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you do something like that, I mean, well, first of all, you're getting more people on the show, which, I mean, SummerSlam's one of the 4 biggest shows of the year that you do. I think you want to try and get as many people on there as possible. But also, I mean, it adds a slightly different layer or perspective onto the match than what people have just seen the previous month. So, it gives you a reason to sort of get energized to see that match play out again. I mean, I will say at this point, I think that they have to play this sort of very difficult game where you want to make Braun have to chase the title for a much longer period of time than he really should, right? I mean, logic dictates that he should just go in there, win the thing in 30 seconds, and be like, I'm the king of the world. What are you going to do? I dare anyone to come and take this from me. And if this were WCW in 1998, that's exactly what would happen. But they are smarter than that. And so he needs to have some frustrating losses along the way where it's like, he absolutely should have won this match. It was right in his grasp. And then some fluke of circumstance prevents him from doing so. I mean, at least that's how I would book this out until, I don't know if you can hold it off until WrestleMania. I think that's probably too long, but I could probably hold this until Survivor Series, maybe the Royal Rumble. I mean, just make him really, keep working for it until, I mean, you really need to put him in a Hell in a Cell match and just have him absolutely, tear the place to shreds in that and win it.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because Breaker's not like a Sammy character, like an underdog. He's a guy who should go and just smash people and win titles. But I mean, Triple H and his type of book, and it's more long term. It's more character development that makes sense based. So Sam Roberts says it best, and I love his podcast. He says, let them cook, especially for how good the product's been, how much we trust them. And I'm going to allow it to let it cook and see where we can go from here. Like I said, I don't think this hurts Breaker. I expect still great things from him. We'll actually talk about Cena at the very end. We'll talk about the matches themselves first. Rollins versus Priest for the World Heavyweight title. Before we talk about the McIntyre cash-in, we got to talk about what I'm pretty sure everybody was talking about, and that was that spot. The Falcon Arrow, the ref counted, said it was 2. Priest did not move the shoulders at all. Was it a music botch? Was he knocked out? Was he concussed? Did the ref somehow see a kick out that the rest of the world didn't? I don't know. I think it may have been a combination of both theories because, Drew's music hit, and they always love to do that spot of the ref counts, music hits, even though I personally hate that spot. I don't think, why would you stop counting when a theme hits? Just keep going.
Right, yeah.
But then I've heard stuff that from Triple H in the press conference that sounded like Priest was maybe supposed to kick out, and they like zoomed in on his face, like a bunch of Twitter tweets, and it looked like he was kind of knocked loopy for a little bit. And I think the ref was talking to him too for a few seconds. In the moment, it does suck that it happened, and that was a big spot in a match, and you know people are going to complain about and everything, but I think Triple H, if you go and watch what he said, I think he said it best. He basically, like, in an appropriate terms, like, shit happens. Like, don't let it take away from the moment. Yes, for our viewers, sometimes like it took a little bit out of it. For me, it might have a bit, but I mean, I'm not gonna sit there and complain and be like it ruined everything or oh, Priest, what are you doing? Like, shit happens. And guess who's more frustrated about that than anybody? Priest. You saw after the match how frustrated he was, clearly at himself. I mean, it's what happens. And Triple H, I think, said too, like, if that was me in that match, even how good the quality would be, I just keep thinking about that one spot. So I think that's more of a short-term thing in terms of like frustration over that spot. I think it's no big deal when we go to SummerSlam. I think we'll get to Drew in a second, but Priest was the right man to retain. But yeah, I mean, it sucks, but shit happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, Priest was the right person to retain, and honestly, what they did even before the match was something that I don't like, is when they create too many stipulations and paint themselves into a corner where it's almost like, well, I kind of know there's no way that Priest can lose this match because I know that you're not going to break up the Judgment Day right now. I mean, yes, we are going down that route eventually. Yes, they will implode, and we'll have that storyline. They're clearly hinting at that, but again, we're not ready to pull that trigger right now, and we know that we're not. So when you add a stipulation like that, to me, it's sort of like, well, I mean, why not just tell me what you're getting me for my birthday? Like okay, you don't need to do that. I mean, as far as the botch goes, I feel particularly bad for Priest because given this, this amazing opportunity, and this is the second big botch in a high-profile match that he's had in as many months, right? He had
broke his leg.
Yeah, the major botch at King and Queen of the Ring, and now he's got this. I felt much worse for him about the King and Queen of the Ring thing because, I mean, that wasn't even a situation where I looked at and said, oh no, this botch ruins this match. I looked at it and said, oh my God, is that man's leg okay? Did he just tear something in his knee? Like, is he all right? And miraculously he was okay. This one, I have a harder time sympathizing with him. I mean, I feel like it's possible he could have been knocked a little loopy, but I mean, this is the biggest match you've had in your entire career, buddy. Like, you're on this huge stage. You can't become known as the guy who can't make it through big matches without making some kind of mistake, and that's the reputation he's making for himself right now, which I feel terrible. But I mean, I don't see how else people are going to end up looking at this. I will say that I thought they missed a great opportunity after this happened to kind of correct for it, right? So right before Priest leaves to go do the match, and he has a little backstage segment with the other members of Judgment Day. There's this moment that he has with Finn Balor where he's telling them, stay back here. I absolutely do not want you to interfere in this match. And they zoom in on Balor, and Balor's like, whatever you want, boss. You got it. But it's this very, sort of cynical, acerbic sort of, I'm doing it, but I don't like it, and I'm getting real sick of your shit. And I thought to myself after it happened, the way to fix this and to make it work in the storyline is on Monday night, you reveal that Balor paid the referee off not to make the count, so that even though he wasn't ever going to come out there before doing what he was asked to do, he was still able to control the narrative of the match
I've heard that theory. You're not the first that said that. I've heard a few comments say they should have done that. That would have maybe worked.
And it would be so simple, and it fits so well. And then they didn't talk about that at all on Monday Night Raw, and I was just like, what, why? Obviously, this is a mistake. Obviously, no one wanted this to happen. But make chicken salad out of chicken shit and fix it. Like it's so simple to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Going into McIntyre cashing in, like you said, I think Priest definitely was the right person to win. And I know there have been criticisms of, was this a waste to do this? And I completely understand that point, but here's my counterpoint. We saw Priest hold that thing for so long. We saw Theory hold that thing for a while and not have a great cash in. So considering Triple H's long-term booking, I'm looking at like the championship picture. Cody Rhodes is not going to get cashed in on. No. I believe Gunther's winning at SummerSlam. He's not going to get cashed in on. Cody and Gunther are booked strongly. They're not. Triple H isn't going to want neither of those reigns to end on fluky cash-ins. I almost get this sense. I've seen comments, and I kind of agree. I feel like Triple H just doesn't like the Money in the Bank concept. I feel like he hates that it interferes with long-term storytelling that he's doing with the world titles. And considering he's trying to have longer reigns and have the title feel like a bigger deal, he probably doesn't want it to end on fluky cash-ins. He wants to have stronger champions lose in like bigger matches. So I understand that the Rollins-Punk feud was already at a high. Maybe it wasn't the most necessary, but I mean, why not try to go even higher for the feud? I mean, piss off Drew even more. We saw him after the show just go nuts, elbow pierce. That's what I want to see. Like, we're past the trolling stages of Drew Punk. We're past that. We are now just like, I'm going to invade your home. Drew said, I know where you live. I mean, this feud is heated. I think it's the best feud right now, not just in WWE, but in wrestling this year. Here's what I love, too, about Punk Cash doing this. They tied Seth back in. Yeah. And Seth Punk was supposed to obviously happen at WrestleMania 40. But then after Drew slid in and then him and Punk had a more interesting feud, Seth kind of got put to the backside. And I was even saying, like, yeah, Seth Punk would be cool, but Drew Punk is what everyone wants to see. And that kind of sucked for Seth. So I love that they implemented him back into the Punk feud, because he was pissed, like, what the hell, dude? Now I can't get a shot again. And I feel like WrestleMania next year, they're going to right the wrong and do this match that they were supposed to do. Is it for a world title or not? Who knows? And I know people are saying maybe a triple threat at SummerSlam. I personally just want Drew Punk for that. That feud, I mean, that's those two that are heated. Seth can wait a little bit, but we're like starting to tease that feud. And I appreciate that. Because literally before WrestleMania, Seth in a segment with Punk was like, I haven't really cared for you since you've been hurt. So we had to like find a way to justify a feud between them. So this was a pretty well done way to do it. It sucks they had to sacrifice the briefcase, but as we see in the women's match, I think that's fine, because who won that match, Tiffany Stratton, I believe she'll hold it for a while, and it will at least have one person hold it for a while. And finally, we might as well just get into that match. I mean, I'm talking about it, but I've been tired of the woman not holding the briefcase for that long. I think the only person that held it for a really long time was Carmella. Besides that, it's either been cash-in on that night or the Raw after or the pay-per-view after. I feel like she can finally be a person that holds it for a while. And that'll make up for the Drew barely holding it for a day. Plus, you kind of want different things. You don't want every Money in the Bank winner to hold it till WrestleMania or forever and cash it in there. We got to differentiate stuff.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. You got to find ways to. I think part of the difficulty with Money in the Bank, and I hadn't really considered that maybe Triple H is just over this whole concept. But yeah, that makes sense to me. I agree that the sort of reintegration of Seth Rollins into this Punk McIntyre feud was really well done, and this is a really sly way of sliding him back in there, making it feel organic that he's sort of reintroduced into this narrative. The trouble with Money in the Bank as a concept, if you're going to do it every year, is there's only so many different ways that you can make the cash in happen, right? Like, at some point, the magician runs out of tricks, and it becomes tedious to keep trying to figure out some new, innovative, clever, original way of doing it. So I could see him not loving it. I could see, potentially at some point down the line, they maybe return it back to kind of its original form, where we're not necessarily going to do it every single year. We're going to do it when it makes sense. It'll be like a special treat that we get, but not necessarily like an every single year in June, just wait for this to happen, or July, wait for this to happen. Sort of thing. It's funny. So we're moving Raw to Netflix in will that be in January, right? It's when
I think it's like literally New Year's of 2025. Yeah.
And obviously one of the big draws for that move that they're sort of presenting to fans is that the show will be essentially completely uncensored, that we'll go back to something that feels more like a sort of revamped version of the Attitude Era, as opposed to the sort of hanging on of the PG era that we exist in right now. And this is the sort of feud where with McIntyre and Punk, and maybe it will have petered out a little by the time we get there, I don't know, but it's the sort of feud where I could see them doing some really wild and crazy stuff that really crosses some lines in terms of what they're willing to try. I think back to the Pillman Austin feud that was going on, where
I know where you're going with this
house, and he takes out the gun and they cut the feet. All of that was really to make up for the fact that Brian Pillman had been in a horrendous car accident and would never be the same again. But I mean, you want to talk about moments from Monday Night Raw that I'll never forget. Brian Pillman pointing a pistol at Steve Austin is one of those things that, like, I'm going to have that emblazoned in my brain until the day I die. And I could see they're not ever going to do that again, I don't think. But, I could see some wild and crazy stuff going on with a feud like this when you take the reins off of them. You take the safety rails away and say, just go crazy, do whatever you want. I could see this being the kind of feud where you could really go in some very dark directions.
Oh yeah, I'm already hyped for it. I'm so excited what they're going to do for the road to SummerSlam. In terms of the women's ladder match, I do agree. I think it was the much better match than the men's. I think it was the best match of the night overall out of all the matches.
Yeah,
and the spots there were freaking insane. Zoe Stark in general, for the theme here is, like I mentioned, Andrade. Him and Zoe Stark really don't get a reaction when they come out. So it seems like they're out to like really prove themselves. And they did. The bumps that those two take, especially the one with Io Sky at the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was brutal. Like those ladder spots, man. Oh, those make me cringe even if I see that so often. That's
can we get some can we get some flowers for Chelsea Green for taking that insane spot off the ladder onto the tables?
I saw she held her hands back, like preparing, because she knew it was going to be rough.
Yeah,
it was just it was executed as good as you could do it. It was done really, really well. And what I loved too, right before she fell through the table, they did this with the men's match with Jay too. First of all, the camera work was so good, making it seem like there were two false like finishes in terms of they're gonna win it. But Chelsea like almost unhooked it. Like I don't know how you could say it. It wasn't just like a cheesy like, oh, slap the briefcase, I can't get it. No, she was like that close to like unhooking it and getting it, and then Tiffany scared her. That was little stuff like that just made it that much better. And the camera work made me truly think for a second that she was going to pull it off until Tiffany came out. And then obviously you said the table spot. Props to her for that. But little parts like that made that match so good.
Well, and the psychology was built up there from the beginning of the match, right? I mean, they're telling us from the very start of the match, afraid of heights. She doesn't even want to be in this match. And then she does a nice job of like going 3 rungs up the ladder of the smaller ladders even, and even that is like giving her vertigo, and she's going, whoa, I don't know, like this is all a huge mistake. I don't know what I've gotten myself into. And then when she finally gets the courage to go all the way up there and scale it, and like you say, I mean, really look like she's going to get it. And to be honest with you, she was the person I thought was going to win this match going into it. I just thought that when I picture a long-term reign, and I imagine what you could do with someone like Chelsea Green and that kind of, chicken shit heel character that she plays, holding that briefcase for so long. I was like, yeah, I can definitely see this being a lot of fun for a year of her just like, using this as leverage to do basically whatever she wants in character. And so I really did think, as she started to take that off the carabiner, I was like, oh, she's, that's it. She's winning it. Good for her. And then when Tiffany Stratton made that, that spot happen, I was just like, oh, well, shit. I mean, that's a horrendous spot to take. And yeah, you're not getting up from that. Like, that's the end of your night. But, I'm perfectly fine with Tiffany Stratton winning this match. Obviously, she's sort of the next big thing. That they are spotlighting in the women's division. They've got a lot of hope pinned on her, and really, if Becky Lynch is not coming back, if she's going to go over to AEW or work in Japan or do whatever she's going to do, then I mean, it's important that they build up someone who could rest on that same level that she was on. Because you're losing. A major star in her. So, I mean, you'll now have lost 2 of the 4 horsewomen, as it were, in WWE. Mercedes Moné having gone as well. And so, yeah, I was perfectly fine with Tiffany winning the match. It's not where I thought they were going to go, but I can respect her winning it. I think she's proven herself to be more than capable of making good things happen in big moments, and I presume that she will eventually be either your SmackDown or Raw Women's Champion. I just don't know how long it's going to take for that to happen.
Well, the reason I feel like most people picked Tiffany, it was either her or Chelsea was the majority of picks. I feel like, she was like, it was predictable, but I think it was like a good thing that it was predictable. And yeah, obviously one of the most athletic women WWE, next big thing. I had a feeling she would win because of the Nia Jax thing and the fact that she's challenging Bayley at SummerSlam and they're having this little bond, this little friendship. And I think Nia will probably win that title too. Just keep giving spoiler predictions, but I think she'll take that title from Bayley. And we're going to start to tease. I don't know right away she'll cash in on Nia, but we'll start to tease like, are you going to cash in on me? And Tiffany will be like, no, I won't. And whether she won't actually do it and challenge for the other belt, or if she actually does cash in on Nia, I mean, we'll see. I mean, whenever she does it, the place is going to go nuts because she does deserve to be the champion. But yeah, I think it was match overall great. Definitely think like, yeah, you could have been one of the right winners. Chelsea would have been great too. But yeah, I think overall the right outcome. The main event, Cody Orton and KO versus the Bloodline. I felt like it was obviously a fun match. Of course, with the Bloodline, the ref has to get knocked down in every single Bloodline match. and it's got to be a long, articulate story. But I felt like it was good, despite the fact that there really weren't any stakes because it was just the 6-man tag. And there was obviously good spots. It was the most predictable match for me of the night. I knew full well Solo was going to pin Cody, considering the direction we're going in at SummerSlam. But to me, and I think obviously everyone's been saying this, Fatu stood out the most out of anyone in that match. He looked like a badass. That opening spot with Orton, with the draping DDT, and then he gets up, and Orton's going to do the stomping or the pounding for RKO, and he just slowly stops and looks up. Oh, that was cinema right there. That was so good. I'm so happy they're presenting Fatu like this. And the way, like, he did like a whisper the wind to Cody, like, he just looked legit. I see why they had all these like worries he's going to outshine Solo. I mean, at the time I thought it was like a little bit like, ridiculous, because like the way they're presenting Solo, like, I don't know if he's going to get outshined, but like in terms of who people maybe are more impressed with in terms of movesets, yeah, Fatu's got him beat there, and he's in the best shape of his life too. But yeah, he just stood out to me in that match. He was so good, and overall a good, predictable main event. Kind of weird that it did main event, but I get it. It's the bloodline, and Cody getting pin's a big deal. And obviously we're heading into Solo Cody at SummerSlam, and eventually Roman Reigns' return, which I really hope I get to see live.
So yeah, I agree. The sort of outcome of the match did not surprise me in the least. However, I was a little let down by this match because I was expecting there to be a couple of run-ins in here, or a couple of like surprises that came from this match, especially because they put it on last.
Was Jimmy one of them you were expecting, or was it even Roman? You thought
Roman? I thought Roman would make an appearance. My original thought was that Roman would make his in-ring return at SummerSlam, and so I thought, well, okay, if you're going to make your in-ring return at SummerSlam, the only time to make your kind of reintroduction that makes any sense would be at Money in the Bank, because what are you going to do? Come back on a random SmackDown? That's not going to happen. No one cares about that. So I expected him and Heyman to like walk out and at the very least distract the Bloodline. Maybe after the match was over, like obviously you need the Bloodline to win the match, but like as they're celebrating and putting the one fingers up, I thought we would hear his music hit and him kind of stand there and just, all I have to do is look at him and give him the head shake of like, oh no, you screwed up so bad. You have no idea how badly you screwed up, buddy. And I thought that's how we were going to go off the air. But that didn't happen. And look, I understand why it didn't happen. His dad had just died. They were doing the funeral that day. It was a big deal that Jay didn't even get to go to the funeral because he was here.
That's right.
Solo too. Yep. Well, I mean, the whole bloodline, right?
The whole bloodline.
But like I understand him not being there. I get that. But I didn't realize it was the day of his dad's funeral until the event had started, and so I kind of came into it thinking, oh, we'll get that. Also, we've still got one of Haku's sons left to debut. I mean, he signed,
right.
He hasn't debuted yet. He'll be Tala Tunga when he comes to the WWE. 6'7", 6'8", I think. And apparently a really terrific wrestler himself. Admittedly, I have not seen the man perform. Been doing a lot of stuff in Japan. I just haven't seen it yet, so that's on me. But so part of me was also thinking like they would debut Tala here, and he would come out and help the Bloodline win in some way. And I think once he debuts, I think we're done with Bloodline introductions for a little while. I don't think we have any other cousins or brothers or nephews or whoever, waiting in the wings that I'm aware of.
They keep multiplying. There's so many.
I mean, they're so damn good. The whole family can come in there as far as I'm concerned. But but yeah, so I think I was just a little let down because when they announced the 6-man tag match, my first thought when they announced it was, well, that would be a really good SmackDown main event. I don't love it to be the main event of a pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to do something really special and spectacular with it, and they just didn't do that. I mean, I agree that Fatu looked fantastic. I agree that it helps carry the larger storyline along because, obviously Cody's now been pinned by Solo. That's a big deal, sure. But, I wanted there to be that little something extra if you're going to make it the main event of a pay-per-view like this. And we didn't quite get that. So I was a little let down by it. But I will say I will forgive all things as long as we get a Bloodline versus Bloodline War Games match this year. If we don't get a Bloodline versus Bloodline War Games match, I will riot. That is unacceptable. I don't even care where this match happens. I am going to be inclined to try to find a way to get there.
I think 100% it's got to happen. I think Survivor Series might be the obvious destination there, considering and I love that they do the War Games tradition there. With Roman, I know there were like inklings, like, are they gonna do him versus Solo at SummerSlam, so they'll bring him back earlier? Mm-hmm. Maybe his dad's death had a lot to do with delays. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could be so biased because I'm going to SummerSlam in person to say, no, it's better that he's coming back at SummerSlam because imagine that pop. It does make sense. He's a big enough star now where, returning at a big 4 like SummerSlam just is a big deal.
Sure.
And I think because we're leading the Cody Solo at SummerSlam, and I know there's been a lot of criticism, why is Solo in the main event? He's not ready yet. I get that. People wanted Cody Orton instead. But I feel like that's not so much the attraction of that match at SummerSlam. It's more of when's Roman coming back? Or is Roman coming back? And what's he going to do? That's more what I believe the attraction for a Solo Cody title match is, because I don't believe in one world that Solo's taking that belt off of Cody anytime soon. I don't think anyone is taking that belt off of Cody before we see Rock come back. And that'll probably be next year. So, but it's good for Solo. People have complained for years about WWE not building up talent and just using legends in big title matches. Well, they're doing it, whether we are fans of Solo or not. He's a young star, and it's a fresh main event of a pay-per-view. So at first, initial reactions like kind of a letdown, like Solo Cody, like really that's your main event. But like then when you find out like Solo, like he's done great character work and the attraction is Roman coming back, I come to live with terms with him, be like, you know what, I'm fine with it.
Here's the thing. First of all, I don't mind Cody Solo at SummerSlam for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, I think the SummerSlam card, I mean, at least the fantasy booking version that I see in my head looks pretty damn phenomenal. I mean, this should be a pretty huge event. I mean, they're going to have to work really hard to screw this up. Not that they can't do it. Lord knows I've been alive long enough to watch.
They better not. I'm going in person.
I've been alive long enough to see them screw up many a thing that I thought no one could mess this up. And then they showed me how spectacularly wrong I was. But no, I mean, you just have so many big time matches that are going to happen at SummerSlam. The card's so stacked that I'm not really worried about one match necessarily. The other thing is, I wouldn't even say that. I could be wrong. They can put this match in whatever order they want to. I don't think that's the match that ends the night. I think that the Punk versus McIntyre match is probably what ends the night, just because that's what has the most sort of anticipation behind it, and if for no other reason, because I sure as shit wouldn't want to have to follow that match. Like, I mean, unless they absolutely shit the bed in that match, you're going to have a hell of a hard time. I mean, the fans are going to be so spent after that.
They're going to be going nuts before they even lock up.
Yeah. I mean, no, they're going to easily sit there. They could spend a good 5 minutes just looking at each other, pacing around the ring, doing sort of false starts of acting like we're going to lock up, but then I'm just going to roll out of the ring and walk around. I mean, you could play that for a good 5 minutes and still have people losing their minds. And then to do all that and then say, okay, Solo, Cody, go out there and try to have a match now. Everyone's exhausted and they're not going to care that you're out there, but by all means, please go out and do your thing. It wouldn't be fair to them. Let them go out first. Let them go out before that. Do what they're going to do. You're still going to get the Road Warrior pop for for Roman if he comes back at SummerSlam, which I think he will. If he didn't come back now, he's not coming back until SummerSlam. So, you'll still get the Road Warrior pop for him, and then you can lead into the main event, which, I mean, to my mind, should be Punk and McIntyre. Even though there's not a title to be had in that match, who cares? It's the biggest match you've got. Who gives a shit that doesn't have a title in it, I just want to see them beat each other until one of them bleeds to death. I mean, it should be chaotic. Yeah, I mean, all that to say, I don't dislike Solo. I agree that he's not the best in-ring talent they've got right now. He still has a long way to go. But I'm perfectly fine with giving him the rub for SummerSlam. Give him that spotlight. Let him see what it's like to be out there. He'll be okay. It'll be a good match. Cody's not going to let them have a terrible match.
No, absolutely not. I want it to be McIntyre Punk. It's just going to be hard to believe if Roman comes back. And the fact that it's a bloodline match, that it doesn't main event. Because for the most part, bloodline matches main event pay-per-views, no matter what. And SummerSlams usually end in like a cliffhanger or like a return. Roman came back in COVID. When Brock Lesnar came back in 2021, there's always like, it's either a big title change or it's a big like turn or big return that happens to end the show. So you never know. I personally do think Cody Solo main event, but who knows? I might be wrong. You might be right. But let's talk about the last thing here. And it's emotional because, man, I started watching in 2015 and Cena was one of the first wrestlers I really gravitated to. That was back when he was having the U.S. title open stuff. So I didn't even see like a bunch of other stuff in his career. But I've seen so much of his work, and including people saying in the latter half that it was even the best work he's done in his career, match-wise, promo-wise. So to hear him say, I'm going to retire in 2025, it was weird because at first we thought Mania would be it. And then it's like, no, I'm wrestling all of January to December. I thought that was pretty cool. I think this notion of like, you have to retire at WrestleMania, it's the grand stage. I like that Cena was like, let's do something different. Let's have a whole tour of 2025 and I'll retire in December and that'll be it. And I know people are going to be like, is he actually retiring? Who knows with wrestlers? I believe him. I think he's genuine when he's saying he's done, considering the limited appearances he has, the passion he has for his acting career, and the passion he has for the business in general. And because of Father Time's undefeated, his body declining, physique declining, and everything. Yeah, I do think it's genuine. But yeah, man, definitely thank you, Cena, for all the memories. I can't wait for a fun 2025. What I really hope that we see, because I think the story when we last saw Cena wrestle is, man, I can't win a pay-per-view to save my life. I can't win a match. That'll be the start of the story. And then maybe he could start winning more pay-per-view matches and big matches. And then the goal will be, let's get number 17 and break the record. That would be amazing. I definitely like. I know Punk mentioned he wants to have a match with him. I really want to see Orton have a match with him. People have been saying like he should pass the torch to Breaker. There's all types of matches they can do next year with Cena. So yeah, it's definitely emotional and sad, but like heartwarming too. Of his retirement came out of nowhere. There were no inklings that this was going to happen, but yeah, I'm very excited for his final year in 2025. It's going to be special.
Yeah, I mean, look, I thought that the way they announced it was really interesting. I mean, I like the idea that he's going to have a full year of wrestling ahead of him. That it's not just like, hey, I'm leading up to this one match that's coming up in, September or October or whatever it is, and then that's going to be the end of it. It's a unique way to go out, and I will absolutely say this: he has absolutely earned the right to go out on whatever terms he wants to go out on. Look, I've seen his entire career, right? I mean, I've been there from the very beginning, and now I'll be here at the very end. Assuming that I'm still around, I get hit by a car or something, who knows? But I plan on being there. And so here's what I'll say. I think that Cena did some really great work along the way, particularly his matches with guys like Edge, Adam Copeland, and the work that he did with Punk during their initial feud. I mean, he's done some great things. The work that he did with Kevin Owens, I thought was great. He's had some good feuds in there. He really has. And I have tremendous respect for the sort of weight that was put on John Cena's shoulders, right? Kind of coming out of the Attitude Era, he was the next truly big star that they had. After they lost The Rock and they lost Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, I know that the Triple H became a major star for them, but Cena was a star on a different level. Casual people who aren't wrestling fans at all, there's only a handful of wrestlers that they're ever going to be able to name for you. They'll be able to name Hulk Hogan. They'll be able to name The Rock. They'll be able to name Stone Cold Steve Austin. And they'll be able to name John Cena. But guys like Triple H, guys like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, and people that we might have tremendous respect and admiration for what they've done in the ring, they weren't stars on the level that he was. He was a star on another level than that. And while John Cena is not my favorite in-ring performer, I think that he was always kind of hit or miss for what kind of performance am I going to get out of Cena this time around? Is he going to give me a great match, or is this going to be a dud? Who knows? I don't necessarily have the fondest of memories of his career. Right? There are moments in his career where I go, "Ooh, that one was really good, though. Like he really stepped it up here. This worked out really well." But as a whole, I mean, I think he kind of suffered from oversaturation of product and having to be on the air for Raw and SmackDown all the time. I mean, it grinds on you, after a certain amount of time. As far as him retiring, I mean, look, my honest initial reaction was, oh, thank God. Thank God you're retiring in 2025, because you have looked really bad in these last couple of matches. Like you're losing your ability to do this, like visibly not able to make it happen anymore. I feel like I'm watching, someone who I knew that used to be really good at this go out and struggle. There's
the Solo and Theory matches were, not great.
So there's a story from there's a rock journalist who wrote about all of his sort of exploits writing for things like Rolling Stone and that sort of thing years ago. And he was a big Elvis Presley fan, right? And he wrote about seeing Elvis for one of the last times in Las Vegas, and how Elvis was just sort of out of shape, and his voice wasn't where it normally was. He was having a bad night, and the guy sitting next to him, just some random guy, said, "Man, I really expected this to be better. You know, I mean, it's supposed to be Elvis Presley." And the journalist was trying to assure him, like, "Oh no, I mean, like, he's just having a bad night. I promise you. Like, I've seen him tons of times. He's great. He's this, he's that, and you're not really seeing Elvis Presley tonight. This isn't the true version of him." And the guy sitting next to him took out his ticket and he said, "Says Elvis Presley right here on this goddamn ticket. So you tell me what's going on." And that's kind of how I feel about Cena these last couple of times, right? Is, you know, I'm seeing this shell of the guy that I knew. And it's painful for me to watch him deteriorate in front of my eyes. I'd rather not see that happen. So I hope they put him in the ring with people who can make up for his deficiencies. I hope they put him in the ring with people who can sort of mask what he isn't able to do any longer. And, you know, maybe if he's doing 40 or 50 dates like he alluded to, that's enough for him to kind of get the sea legs back underneath him and actually get back some of his snap again. I think it's tough when you're doing like one or two matches a year, you know? I mean, like your body just isn't going to click back into what you're supposed to do when you're doing that. But look, I like the guy. I've always heard he's a decent human being. I want him to go out on his own terms. I want him to have the end of the career that he deserves. I do not expect there to be a single really great match that comes out of the next year of his life, though. And as far as the 17, breaking the number 17 number, I would be livid if they did it. I mean, to me, 16 is sacrosanct. You don't. I mean, it belongs to Flair. You know, he has just a few more title reigns than he has marriages. Let the man hold on to that number 16 and let that be untouchable in pro wrestling history.
Yeah, I understand that feeling sentiment towards Cena because, like we keep saying, Father Time is undefeated. I personally didn't have that much of that feeling with Cena. I had more of that feeling that you had for him for Undertaker. I had more of that feeling when he kept coming back when he shouldn't have. And I'm like, why do you keep coming back? Because the Roman match, he even admits he shouldn't have been in that ring. And then he's doing all these Saudi shows. And I witnessed that live. And like the DX, the really bad DX match, the Goldberg match. That's more how I felt, like how you felt with Cena, being like, dude, like, why are you coming back? And when he announced his retirement, me and a lot of people are like, thank God, because you're just killing your body out there for no reason. You don't need to. So that was when I more had that feeling. With this, I mean, I get it, but I mean, Cena, when he has a great match, his best matches are obviously with guys like Styles, with Punk, Owens, more indie type of guys. It does take two to tango, but that is the truth in terms of his matches. And his matches have declined, but Solo and Theory aren't the two greatest. We just talked about Solo, and Theory's not exactly putting on like 5 stars. So I think it's a tale of two halves of like who he's working with, who he's trying to elevate. But he's more there for the fan reaction, for the character, because fans looked up to him as a child. So I agree that I don't think we're going to get any Cena Styles type matches next year. But if you put him in the guys, even with like a Cody who can bring a good match out of anyone, like, then yeah, I still would be like intrigued to see what Cena does. I mean, I know I clinged for Orton, but they're both in their 40s, so maybe they might hesitate on doing that because they're both getting older, even though Orton's in great shape. Same with Punk. When Punk said when he said he wanted one more match with Cena, I was kind of like, I don't know if I really want to see that. Let the legend of their matches in the past bill because Punk's struggling on his own to like stay healthy and put on quality matches. So yeah, I feel like Triple H will be smarter than that and not do something like that. He'll put Cena against guys. The only veteran that I see him having like a dream match with is Orton. I don't really see a Punk match happening or like go back to Styles or something. It's going to be more the young guys he tries to have matches with, but I still think we should, respect to Cena. Thank you for a great career. I know he said like he wasn't everyone's favorite. We saw the pulverizing reactions for decades. Fans, kids loved him, but adults did not. But like sometimes time heals all wounds, and people are starting to gain respect for Cena in recent years.
I think this is also, our kind of different reactions to this announcement. To a certain degree, to me, it just comes down to age as well, right? You're like 20 plus years younger than I am, and so he meant something different to you when you were watching him and growing up than he meant to me. For me, he was the next in a long line of guys who had gotten that big and had their sort of moment in the sun and carried the ball as far as they possibly could. Like you said, you sort of came in closer to maybe the end of his main run with the company, where, I sort of, watched him from like the Doctor of Thugonomics on through,
PG,
the PG era. And don't get me wrong, like I say, there were some great highlights in there, some matches that I really enjoyed. But, if you told me, oh, they're main eventing with a Cena match tonight on Raw, I'd go, okay, yeah, I get it. Like, who's he wrestling? Is it someone that can actually work? Because if it's not, to me, he had much the same problem that Hogan had for years, where it was like, if you put Hogan in there with someone who could really work, then they could get a good match out of each other, But if you put Hogan in there with someone who was maybe not the best technical worker in the world, or who wasn't the most experienced, you were really threading the needle of, is this going to be watchable or not? And I don't think that Cena was. I don't want to cast him as being as inept in the ring as Hogan more often than not was, but my enjoyment level of watching him varied more often than not. It wasn't. Watching someone like Flair growing up. You could tell me, if you told me in 1990 or 1991, Ric Flair is wrestling a broom in the main event, I'd be like, man, this is going to be pretty badass. He is going to make that broom look good. Because that's just how good he was. He could do no wrong at that point. He was just, from 1988 or 87 or 88 until like 1993, maybe 1992, he just almost couldn't have a bad match. He was just so on fire. And for me, Cena just never had that level of ability. He was more dependent on someone else working really well with him, or gelling really well with someone else. But look, guy had a fantastic career. He's obviously a legend in the business, and I'm more than happy to let him go out on his own terms. He absolutely deserves that.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely understand your perspective, but that's going to conclude it for Money in the Bank. Let's get into Raw, and we'll go over that a little more quickly, since obviously you want to take more of our time for pay-per-view type stuff here. The Rollins Punk segment, we pretty much already talked about how they tied Seth back into the story and everything.
Great segment, though.
Yeah.
both guys talked their ass off in this segment.
Oh yeah, that those two, yeah, they can't miss in terms of talking promos like that. But the first big, I guess the big thing I want to talk about, it first happened with the Jay Gable match where the Wyatt Six scared him off again. And Jay got the win, and that shot when Jay realized that they were coming, his eyes wide, and he's just like, "Yeet,
Yeah,
I'm out, I'm
yeah.
out." That was
That was
hilarious.
comic gold. That was comic gold.
That was that was amazing. And then obviously got another VHS tape again.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these have been so well done. I think this is like the third one we've seen in a few weeks. And Bo Dallas has been cutting some of the best stuff of his career. And we really this is pretty much this like maybe not the final VHS tape, but like this is kind of like him unleashing the Wyatt Six, releasing them into the darkness. And now they're going to unleash chaos on everybody. And God, it freaked me out, honestly. Like the static stuff and just the effects and everything. And then they actually did show the faces of most of like the stable pretty much. Mm-hmm. So that was just it's as perfect as you can get to like honor Wyatt's legacy to me. And then the moment, like you see in the picture of Bo Dallas sitting in Pierce's office and then giving a nice smile at the end. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, I am so excited for what the Wyatt Six is about to do.
I'm cautiously optimistic that they are going to get this right, and everything that they've done so far makes it feel to me like they are going to make sure this is done the right way. I think that I'm kind of holding out any criticism or major praise for this until we actually see it, like the rubber hit the road and we start having matches and stuff. Because that's the part that has me sort of concerned, if I'm being honest. I mean, the fact of the matter is there's no one in the Wyatt Six that I think is a fantastic wrestler, right? A lot of guys who I individually like, Nikki Sixx included, or Nikki Cross rather included, excuse me. But I don't know. I mean, I don't look at any of the people in there and go, oh, this person could be a major breakout star at some point. And that was something that was very clear to me in the Wyatt family when they were coming up. I mean, you saw Bray and you immediately saw Bray as like, well, that guy has star written all over him. I mean, he talks better than almost anyone I've ever seen. He's got a unique in-ring style, but it works. And same thing for Luke Harper. He was one of those guys who when you saw him in the ring, you went, oh yeah.
Very underrated to me. Very underrated to me as a performer with the accomplishments that he's had. Like he's in-ring. Luke Harper was amazing.
And I mean, if he had more time in AEW, who knows, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, he who knows what stratospheric heights he would have eventually reached. I mean, he was already doing amazing things in AEW when he passed. But I look at the crew for the Wyatt Six, and I say, those are a lot of, forgive the term, but a lot of good B+ performers you got there. I don't think any of them are going to get become A+ performers in the ring suddenly, but we'll see what they can put together, and maybe they prove me wrong. I will say I always thought Bo Dallas got a really bad run, his first run through WWE. If you look back at the stuff he did in NXT, he is capable of doing some great wrestling. I mean, maybe not World Heavyweight Championship caliber wrestling, but like upper mid-card level caliber wrestling. Yeah, he's definitely capable of that. But his whole, the Bo Leave character was just, he got really stuck with a bad situation there, and was never really able to show fully what he was capable of, and I felt bad about that. So yeah, look, I'm holding out hope. I like what I've seen so far. so far, no notes. They're doing their thing. But it's it's a long way left to go before we sleep. So,
oh yeah, we got to see the end game of this stable, obviously, and I understand the cautious optimism because we've seen their reputation with handling Bray Wyatt when he became the Fiend, how they kind of ruined and affected those characters. I'm optimistic that this is Triple H now doing it, that it can be ran better. But we saw even in the Bray Wyatt documentary how, like, yes, he'd come up with a bunch of ideas, but it's pretty hard to like implement it into like a story because he just came up with so many out of the box ideas. I'm just wondering if that'll be a case here where it's going to be tough because eventually they have to be in the ring. And I agree that like they're great characters, but when you think of them as wrestlers, you're not going to like go nuts to see a match. Now, I do feel like we're heading towards like a Howdy Gable match, possibly SummerSlam, Howdy's debut.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty good opponent for him to have because Gable another guy who can have a great match with anybody.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird how they implemented Gable into this and kind of just the Otis storyline, which was so good. They kind of just abandoned it a little bit. And now Gable's dealing with the Wyatt 6. It's kind of odd to me.
I feel so bad for Otis. I feel like poor Otis throughout his whole career, like he gets momentum with his tag partner in NXT. They go over to the main roster. They're doing pretty well for themselves. The company drops his tag partner. Okay, Otis, what are you gonna do? And he goes out, makes a name for himself as a solo star, wins the Money in the Bank, gets it taken away from him. Just completely gets made to look like a chump. With it. That's okay, Otis. Don't worry. We're going to partner you with Chad Gable, great performer. Two of you are going to, have a great time. And then right as, he's getting ready to have this major feud with him. Ooh, sorry, bud. Something more interesting came along. We're going to need you to sit over there for a while we work through this. We'll come up with something for you, though. Don't worry. I don't know. Otis feels to me very much like you can describe his entire WWE run as always a bridesmaid, never a bride. Like he keeps kind of getting shoved to the side at every possible opportunity when something shinier comes along, by no real fault of his own. I just, I don't know. I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah, and that was the one like major criticism I would have because as like intriguing as the Wyatt 6 stuff has had, and yes, like it's cool to see Gable get creeped out, but why are you abandoning a really good storyline with the breakup of the Alpha Academy? And they've been teasing him with the Creed brothers and Ivy Nile, and I'm wondering when the heck's that gonna happen? Because it just seems like this is kind of interfering with Gable because yes, Otis I think shoved him and got a huge pop, but we were supposed to get the moment where he finally like knocked him out and like the crowd would go nuts. And back to like the Intercontinental title, I really wanted him at Clash at the Castle to win it, and I really wanted him versus Otis at SummerSlam for the Intercontinental title just because of the heat Gable has. Because he's, besides Dominic, he's got the most heat right now in the company. So the fact that they kind of are just like, oh, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do the Wyatt 6 instead. It's intriguing, but I'm with you. Like, I feel bad for Otis. Why would you abandon this? It was so good until they, just stopped doing it.
Well, I think you could have run them concurrent to one another, right? I mean, you still could have had the Otis feud and have the Wyatt 6 sort of interfering or on the periphery of that, even making the argument that like one of the reasons that Gable is losing this feud to Otis is because his mind can't focus on that feud, right? Like his attention is constantly split. But to sort of just throw Otis away and say, I know we built this up for like 2 months, but screw it. We're not going to do this right now. We got better things to work on. It's just sort of a slap in the face to Otis and also to the other, folks in the Alpha Academy. Unfortunate. I mean, it won't be the last time it happens. That's kind of the way things go sometimes in this business. But yeah, if I were, I don't know, if I were Otis, I'd be looking at when my contract was coming up because AEW is looking like some pretty green pastures to me.
We'll see. You never know. But moving along, we already kind of talked about what Breaker did on Raw. Judgment Day beating Awesome Truth and Strowman. Sonya Deville coming back. I almost forgot to mention that, and then I put it in at the last minute that she did return. So that was pretty cool. But the big thing I wanted to talk about, obviously, was the main event. Liv Morgan, Dominic versus Rhea and Selena Vega. And the thing I was going to mention to you, I was picking the right time to do it. When we've talked in class, like we always, like after class, would discuss wrestling. You were very into the Judgment Day. Like you're a big fan of them. And you were kind of afraid at WrestleMania around that time that they would break up or it wouldn't be a big deal anymore. Turns out they're one of the more intriguing stories right now that WWE has. And I bet you're very happy about that. I'm obviously very happy about that. The Rhea injury almost felt like the biggest blessing in disguise in terms of to allow Liv into this story, which has been incredible. And Dominic finally pinning his father after all this time, getting that heat. And then obviously him and Liv in an interesting position, to say the least. And then looks like he's about to kiss her. And then here comes Rhea coming out. And man,
everything about this storyline.
Oh my God, yes.
I think you're exactly right. This is a blessing in disguise for them. Who knows if they would have inserted, Liv into the storyline if Rhea had never been injured. But thank God they did, because this is some of the best work that Liv's done in her entire career.
Yeah.
I mean, this is peak chef's kiss quality work for her. And I mean, it's the most intriguing thing. If you had told me 2 years ago that I would absolutely love Dominic Mysterio's character and could not wait for him to be on TV every week, I'd have said, no, that doesn't sound right. That's not going to happen. But God bless him. This kid is just such a fantastic heel. As horrible of a babyface as he was, he is an outstanding heel. And this sort of weird love triangle thing between them. I mean, they could go a lot of different ways with this at SummerSlam. I don't exactly know what they're planning. I mean, what I'd like to see happen is Rhea versus Liv, with either Dominic as the special guest referee or with him on the outside, it being like almost like a Miss Elizabeth Mega Powers thing. Whose corner is he going to be in, and that kind of thing. Something like that. But you're right. Yeah, I mean, this is kept really not just Dominic interesting, but it's added some extra charge to the entire Judgment Day, giving them some new life and some reinvigoration that I thought they needed. And really, I think it's probably the reason that you haven't seen them break up is because it's like, on the one hand, they are sort of coming to that point in their life cycle where we need to either break them up entirely or we need to redistribute who's in the Judgment Day and what that means. But at the same time, it's so intriguing and it's so well done. It's like you don't want to get rid of what's working. You don't want to shoot the cash cow while it's still out there producing for you. And man, this thing it's just red hot.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I love the most is that every member plays a key role in it. Finn Balor plays a huge role into this story. Carlito's got the comedy relief when him and Finn like popped up like cartoon characters. That was amazing. Damian kind of, to me, leaning towards more of the baby face here. Like,
Yeah.
It seems like he called Rhea on the phone. He gave Seth, he was like, you know what, the gentleman's agreement, forget it. Like, he's kind of actually, for once, he is acting like the leader. And he's like the one like trying to stop all this Liv stuff. JD, I guess, kind of is there, but but
everyone has this
but
issue.
everyone's kind of got a role.
I like JD. I really do. I think that JD is one of those guys who, if I fast forward 4 years from now, JD can be an Intercontinental Champion to me. He's got that kind of in-ring talent, and he's a little pinball in the ring. He's just bumping around for people like nobody's business.
Oh yeah, he's good, fantastic worker.
He's giving you those Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan bumps where he's going to do 8 flips when you hit him once just to make a point. But yeah, no, I think he's got a ton of talent. He'll be somebody eventually. And right now he's playing his part perfectly fine, where he goes and getting some experience under his belt. But yeah, no, I think this is a fantastic angle, and really, I mean, this is a great kickoff episode to me heading into SummerSlam. I mean, it really feels like they're coming out of kind of the doldrums of a lot of the injuries that they suffered just after WrestleMania. Where there was a period of time there for about a month and a half or so where I really felt like, man, it just feels like everybody on this roster is nursing some kind of injury and is out. And now you're starting to see some of those folks come back, and it just feels like they're hitting their stride at the right time, and that SummerSlam is going to be a really, really big deal.
Yeah, and I said blessing in disguise. Rhea's has. Punk's certainly has been a blessing in disguise. That's just how good WWE's writing has and how good their storytelling has been this year. The fact that they're able to pivot and do all that. I definitely think we're heading towards a Liv Rhea SummerSlam match. And yes, Dominic's going to play a factor. Who knows what it is? But yeah, the pop Rhea got was amazing. I mean, Rhea's not going to be a heel much longer. She's already isn't, but she's not going to be really. I definitely see her and Priest getting ousted. In my prediction, I see them getting ousted. Whether it's soon at SummerSlam or whether it's later, if anyone's going to get ousted, I think it's those two, because everybody else is kind of in favor of what Liv Morgan's doing. And I think Dominic is, maybe like pretending to be like, oh, what are you doing, Liv? And I think ultimately he's going to side with Liv. I could see a low blow or some betrayal maybe at SummerSlam to Rhea Ripley. And imagine when that happens and just the anticipation of wanting to see Rhea just kick Dom in the nuts or punch him in the face. Everyone wants to see that. Whereas 2 years ago, she just kept doing that to him every week before he joined the Judgment Day. Now, people want to see it. So that's, I think, the direction they're going, but you never know. Who knows how long this could play out?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think that he turns on Rhea probably at SummerSlam, and I could almost see this as being like an NWO black and NWO red kind of situation where you just split the Judgment Day and half of them go with one group, half of them go with the other. Maybe you bring some other people in, but yeah, I mean, Dom is gonna side with Liv on this, and then it will be, Dom and Liv versus Rhea and presumably Damian Priest or whomever else. But I mean, look, this is the hottest thing they got going, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. I'm looking forward to a lot of the matches that we've sort of looked in the crystal ball and said we think this is what's coming for SummerSlam. I mean, SummerSlam card looks to me, at least in my imagination on paper, it looks to me like it's going to be one of the best cards of the year, and that should set them up really nicely heading closer toward them setting up for Survivor Series and War Games, and setting up for the Royal Rumble. And I mean, the rest of this calendar year could be really special for them if they play their cards right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think they got out of that post WrestleMania kind of lull where it's like it's kind of tough to recover from that and guys being injured. With guys coming back now we're on the road to SummerSlam. I think we're definitely heading towards a pretty good latter half of the year. Very excited. Before we get into the Takedown top 5 list, just 2 quick things I wanted to mention. Very last minute stuff I added. I had it in my TV background for a little bit. It's not there anymore, but WrestleMania Behind the Curtain was out last week. And there was a lot of stuff that like we kind of tended to know already, but like basically like the intriguing parts of it to me at least were like The Rock and Triple H revealing what was going to happen. They had Mania plans back in October, and then The Rock kind of affected those plans a lot, and a lot of confusion and everything. It's crazy that one of the most crazy things was that they still had Cody win the Rumble, but Triple H told him that day we're probably leaning towards Rock Roman. The one thing Triple H said that I kind of disagreed was that like, oh, if Cody loses the Rumble, he's damaged. I don't know if that would have been true. I felt like you could have maybe found a way to still get Cody somehow in the main event, but I guess I understand his point. But the fact that Cody won the Rumble and pointed at Roman, but yet Triple H still told him or leaning Rock Roman is insane to me. And ultimately, we all knew this because of The Rock's position on the board, but the decision came down to him in terms of what was going to happen. And people were giving him a lot of shit for even getting involved in it, which understandably, but he came to his senses and understood like he hated that even if it was a small portion of the fans that they weren't happy that he was involved in this and affecting Cody. So The Rock did, in I think most people's minds, make the right decision and gave Cody his main event. And then I think it made that Cody Roman match and the Bloodline stuff way more interesting when he turned heel. So just that documentary was just crazy to see. It's crazy to see this soon after WrestleMania. Like, hey, this is what the plans were.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't watched the documentary yet. I knew it had come out, but I haven't gotten a chance to sit down and watch it yet. But look, I'm glad they came to their senses and that they gave us, the Cody versus Roman match that everyone wanted. You talked before about how sometimes it's not a bad thing when you know what's going to happen, but you give it to people anyway because that's what they want to see. And I think the WrestleMania 40 main event was kind of a perfect example of that. People knew that Cody was almost certainly going to win that match and become champion, but they also desperately wanted that to happen because of the year-plus long storyline you'd been using to build up to that. So yeah, the interjection of The Rock into that. My only regret now is that I wish they would have come to their senses earlier, so he could have turned heel right from the start, and we wouldn't have had sort of awkwardness of trying to figure out how do we back our way out of what we've been doing for 2 weeks now, and
Yeah, Cody saying, but not at WrestleMania. Maybe wasn't the right way to like have Cody back out, but at least they did come to their senses. The final thing before the top 5 list here, and I got to get his name out of this announcer. WWE hires a ESPN sportscaster, former Joe Tessitore. I think that's how you say it. He is going to join WWE's broadcast term. I'm guessing he's going to be on SmackDown because Michael Cole and McAfee got Raw pretty much undercover. And SmackDown's Corey Graves and Barrett, but Corey's not necessarily like a main announcer that much. He's better as like the side commentator. So they're bringing him in. I know a lot of people are already skeptical, being like, here comes another sports guy into WWE that announcer that people are going to turn on because it's happened before. I think he does baseball. I'm trying to remember exactly because I remember him because I've watched ESPN for years, and he's got like a good voice and everything. But yeah, it's good. It is always going to be tough for guys like him to like translate, like, because commentating in sports and commentating in like WWE are two different worlds, and it's not an easy transition. So, but I'm interested to see how he's going to sound because it seems like they love Cole and McAfee together. That's like the duo there. I think they're trying to figure out SmackDown, trying to figure out what fits best.
So I actually thought they might bring him in to replace McAfee during the football season because McAfee is not going to be able to make every event during the football season because he's got his college football responsibilities that he's got to do during the season. I'll reserve judgment on the guy until we see him. To your point, I mean, I lived through Mike Adamle when they brought him in.
Yeah,
that was a disaster. I've seen some terrible commentators in my day, more than I'd like to remember, honestly. But the guy could turn out to be great. I mean, won't know until we give him a chance, I guess. So I say put him out there, see what he can do. Look, if it turns out awful, you can always cut him. I mean, it won't be the first time that we've had somebody on for a month and a half or 2 months, and suddenly it's just like, oh yeah, that guy, he went away. You're not gonna ever see him again.
Yeah.
So whatever. We'll see. We'll see what he's like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a wait and see type game with them. So we'll see what happens there, but definitely just wanted to mention that. But we'll get into our takedown top 5, and I'll go first since I have it on my PowerPoint. It's a little bit confusing with the wording, but it's our favorite wrestlers' ring gear. It's not like any specific ring gear, like, from this pay-per-view. It's just your certain wrestler, and like you loved like all their ring gear, how they looked every time. So number 5 is Roman Reigns. And this one's kind of like a simple, like I love like the simplicity of it because first of all, he looks badass in black. It's his color. It seems to suit him. I mean, I'm a sucker for over the top stuff, and we'll talk about that, my other like people on the list, but I like simplicity as well. And I love the golden glove, love the red glove. And that's all he needed with the physique that he had and just the look that he had. I mean, that's all I really had to say, pretty much. I mean, I think he occasionally wore like red boots, or like he always prides himself on like wearing like stylish shoes and everything. Yeah, kind of like a sportsy type look. He'd always wear like either t-shirts or a sweatshirt, but I think it fitted him. I think it looks good. Number 4 is John Cena that we just talked about, and the many, many shirts that he had. I mean, the guy's a good salesman. WWE knew what they were doing. I know maybe not everyone was a fan of the jorts and the tennis shoes, the Reeboks, but it was cool to me. It was unique. It was different than the typical tights that most wrestlers wear. I felt like it was pretty cool. And I mean, The Rock called him a fruity pebble for a reason, but like the shirts sold, and yeah, I feel like they're colorful. They stand out to children, especially, and the wristbands. I felt like it was cool, and I liked seeing every time he came back. I always would wonder like, what's he wearing this time? Because at Money in the Bank, he wore like red with his like farewell tour shirt. I can't wait to see how many shirts he has in 2025. He's gonna have a lot. Number 3 is Seth Rollins. And I know I got a blurry picture there, but it's kind of like showing like Seth's ring gear and what he like tributes it to. I mean, the infamous white one at SummerSlam, I believe 2015, that Mr. McMahon allegedly told him to never wear again for some reason, even though that looked amazing on him. He wore a lot of stuff based off of superheroes, Marvel characters, Power Rangers, and they all look so cool. And then obviously now modern day, what ridiculous thing from Becky's closet is he going to pick out to wear on Raw? it's so cool of the imagination that this guy has. He never runs out of ideas to come up with very unique ring gear. Number 2, probably a very popular one, is Rey Mysterio. I know a lot of people associate that and probably usually maybe have him number 1. Another guy who bases it off of comic superheroes, the Flash, Joker, all other types of superheroes. But yeah, I mean, you want to talk about selling. Those masks sell like no other. And one day when I can actually afford to, I'll definitely look and see like the most intriguing type of colorful mask that Rey has, because just his legacy of that and the fact that WCW tried to ruin that and take the masks off him. What were they thinking? Thank God WWE came to their senses and knew that his shirts sell, or not shirts, his like the mask will sell because he has all kinds of them. So yeah, very iconic attires. I wanted to get a woman on here as an honorable mention real quick, and it is Rhea Ripley. Another one like Roman Reigns, like gets simple, like nothing flashy, but it's badass. And this like with like the more shorts or trunks, I think she tried to wear like long pants at one point. I just think showing off like her very strong muscular legs and her physique, I think that's like her best look. So yeah, I love Rhea's simple but great attire. But number 1 to me is The Undertaker. And this is kind of like an evolution of him throughout the years. And just that's what was so intriguing and cool to me was, yeah, it was like a similar character besides the American Badass. It was a similar like character, like a similar look, but it would be they change it up a little bit, whether it was the gray gloves, the purple gloves, or the Ministry of Darkness era, or the 1998 look that he had. That was one of my personal favorites that he's ever had, or obviously the one we know with the more silky type or leathery type jacket and the hat from more the modern Undertaker, or the American Badass, whether people liked him or didn't. Just the different looks that he's had throughout his career, the different attires that he came out to, was just amazing to me, how different he could be and how much he kept not so much reinventing himself for like but more like changing up a little bit, freshening up his style to adapt to however the company was being presented. That always resonated with me, seeing like his attire. So yeah, kind of like one maybe people didn't expect, maybe you didn't, but yeah, his ring attire's my personal favorite that I've seen.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. A lot of those are great picks. Even though it's not his best era in terms of the wrestling he was doing, or necessarily the opponents they had, my personal favorite ring gear that Undertaker ever had were the purple gloves. I just loved the purple Undertaker thing for whatever reason. I just thought it looked nice. But I'll get to my list, and I apologize. I actually did sort of break the rules that you laid out there, because some of mine are actually specific gear they wore on specific nights or events.
It's not a big deal. It's just because like I'm not going to remember specific pay-per-views as much as you would. So,
but I'll do a couple of honorable mentions before we get into the actual list. The Road Warriors is my first honorable mention. Particularly their NWA look, but I mean, they look great in the WWE as well. But the NWA look they had, I mean, those guys came in and they looked like they were going to absolutely destroy you. Fantastic gear, the spikes, iconic. And I think especially for me growing up as a kid, I mean, that was one of the first times I really remember looking at two human beings and going, I've never seen anybody look like this before. I mean, I don't know what to do with this. Jushin Thunder Liger, honorable mention from me. Just really loved the the gear, loved the mask. Very superhero-esque, very anime-esque, particularly at a time before I think really anime had become a big deal in the United States necessarily, or as big of a deal as it was going to become. but a really, really great looking set of ring gear for him. And my last honorable mention was Shawn Michaels, but particularly from 1994 to 1998. I liked the tights, the hearts on the tights, the boots, the sort of like biker style or kickboxing kind of boots that he had, and then the knee pads. Really great look for him. I will say I absolutely did not like when he came back and he had like the baggier pants. That bothered me for his entire return. I was always like, what's the matter with you? You still have the same legs. Just put back on the old tights. What's the matter with you? But man, that 94 to 98, those tights, really, regardless of which night you see him on, were almost always, it was just always a great look. So my top five, my first one is the Great Muta, particularly the NWA run of the Great Muta from 89 to 90. I like a wrestler wearing face paint. I like a wrestler wearing masks. It's just something that I've always enjoyed. He had a great look just coming out to the ring with like the gear that he wore to come out, and then when you combine that with the great different looks he could have for his face paint every night once he took that off and started wrestling. Also, first time I've ever seen someone shoot mist at another person during a match, which maybe a little overplayed for me now at 43. Play at 10, I was in. That was, I thought that was the best thing I'd ever seen in my life. Rey Mysterio from Halloween Havoc 1997, which actually was one of the photos you were kind of referencing from the gear that Seth had on that one night. But the Phantom get up that Rey Mysterio wore at his Halloween Havoc match, I just thought it looked incredible. A lot of Rey's, I agree with you, a lot of Rey's gear over the years has just been fantastic. He's always put a lot of time and thought into what he wears to the ring, but that set of tights in particular, I just have a special affinity for. Bret Hart. I liked Bret's trunks, his gear throughout most of his career. WrestleMania 10 in particular, I thought was a really great example of him looking his sharpest. Great match for him that night. He had, a couple of great matches, but the match with his brother in particular to start the show off was just one of my all-time favorite matches. I love the pink and black attack. It's an iconic look to me. It's something that he pulled off so beautifully. I mean, I almost can't imagine anyone else even wearing pink now because he did it so well. That I'm like, no, that belongs to him. You can't do this now because you're not.
He made it look badass. He made pink look badass.
He did. The Fiend. Look, I know this may be a bit of a controversial pick. I really enjoyed the way that they handled the Fiend gimmick for the most part. I liked the prosthetics. I liked the sort of smoke and mirrors and the special effects and all of that. And I thought that Bray Wyatt was able to manage to emote through all of that really, really well, which is an incredibly hard thing to do, when you're really taking away a lot of your traditional tools that you use to emote. He was able to make himself feel like a fully realized character, even with all of that on. And I was just really taken with that, I thought that was an important evolution of his character, and just I was all in for the Fiend. I was like, yes, this will be fine. I didn't love some of the stuff they did near the end with it, I think his feud with Orton was problematic. Some of the things that they tried to pull off didn't quite work the way they wanted it to, but the aesthetic of the look was great. And then the last one I have is Vader, particularly Vader in New Japan Pro Wrestling. If you've never seen him in his New Japan Pro Wrestling days, this would be late 1980s, early 1990s. They bought him and made for him this gigantic mask that made him look like a mastodon.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And it was this incredible mask. It shot steam out of the sides of it, and I mean, he looked incredible walking out with that, and even when he took it off and kind of sat down in front of him and let the steam shoot off, and he did his whole, who's the man? I'm Big Van Vader, because he was still a Big Van Vader at the time, not just Vader. It was just an incredible look, incredibly intimidating, really got you into the character, really sold who he was. And I just thought took the character to a different level than he had been before. It was part of what made him a star to me. He didn't carry the mask or the get up with him necessarily after he became a more regular star in WCW. He certainly didn't have it with him when he came to the WWE, but I just thought that was a fantastic look. I appreciated what they did there. And it's just one of those iconic looks that whenever I think of him, I always think of him having, this giant metal get up scene in front of him with all the steam shooting out from it and him just kind of with his arms outstretched like, who dares come at me right now? And it's just, it's a fantastic look and a good example of like the absurdity and the fun and the sort of pageantry to me of pro wrestling.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I loved that you had like ones from like the past, like the 80s, the 90s, because obviously like I obviously watch clips in wrestling from the 90s, but of course when I make lists or when Matt and Troy are on or any other guests, it's going to be more modern stuff because we more associate with that and we watch that. You've been a fan forever, so you definitely like have. I'd love to get different perspectives from you in terms of like attire or just like talking about wrestling because you've watched a lot. You've been through a lot of wrestling history in the past. So yeah, it's very cool to get different perspectives. That's why I try to get new guests. So I appreciate you doing the show. It was really fun doing this.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on. And, I suppose I should mention, they weren't on my list, but I mean, Ric Flair's ring gear, all of his robes, I mean, definitely iconic.
Oh yeah.
And although not my favorite ring gear of all time, which is why it wasn't on my list, but I mean, maybe the most iconic and important ring gear of all time is gorgeous George Wagner from the 1950s, who's really the first modern day wrestling heel. And the way that he was able to use his gear to expand on his gimmick and to make people hate him and to make people, have visceral reactions to him. I mean, we owe a lot to him for what he was able to do there, in terms of making the sort of prototype or the architect of what pro wrestling was going to be, archetype rather, for what pro wrestling was going to be. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that his gear was, if not my favorite, certainly probably the most important gear in pro wrestling history.
Oh yeah, and again, like I just mentioned, to get perspectives like that. Like I obviously know about the history of Gorgeous George, but I never sometimes think of him to put him on my list. I definitely should think that though, because yeah, it was a very important aspect of the business. Maybe the first true heel or like type of character that the wrestling industry has seen. So obviously he was very important to the business, but yeah, we've gotten through everything. Almost 2 hours in. Long episode. Not by much, though, because me, Matt, and Troy have had like hour 45, hour 50 episodes vamping on to. So, yeah, but you have the record for the longest one at around 2 hours. But a very enjoyable, very fun 2 hours. This has been a blast to talk with you and to talk wrestling. And maybe one day we can get you back on at some point.
I would love to come back. It's my pleasure. Happy to come back anytime, and happy to see that you're continuing doing the podcast. Well after the class is over. That's always my hope with that particular class is that folks will keep doing their shows well after the class is finished, and really build something special. And I feel like you're absolutely doing that. So congratulations, and I hope you. I hope to be back around for episode 100 of WrestleMan.
Well, we got around 84 left to get to 100. We're getting there, but yeah, that means a lot. I appreciate that a lot, and yeah, we'll like I said, we'll definitely get you back on. And when not if, but when 100 hits, it's gonna be very special. You should get like everybody possible that I know that's a wrestling fan to get on. But that's gonna do it here for WrestleMan the podcast. Thank you again to Dr. Lowry Woodall for doing this. And I'll be right back here at a normal time next week. It's every week. It's always TBD if I'm going to get someone who knows if Matt and Troy will be back, who knows if my roommate Dylan will be back. Maybe it'll just be me for the first time in forever, but we'll see. But have a great week, guys, and I'll see you next Tuesday.